Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Today, Iran struck back after the US bombed its uranium enrichment sites, but it was for the moment a very limited retaliation. It looks like a small number of missiles were fired at US bases in Qatar and elsewhere. Several media outlets reported that Iran had given an early warning of what it was about to do, which is a sign of Tehran looking to de-escalate the situation. But that won't end the debate about American foreign policy under President Trump, and that is a debate that divides the MAGA movement. Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, and Marjorie Taylor Greene have been arguing against the US getting dragged into another foreign war. More traditional figures, like, say, Lindsey Graham, have been arguing for staunch support for Israel. To dig into this, I'm joined by Kelley Vlahos of the Quincy Institute and Nguyen of The Verge. Kelley is a former executive editor of The American Conservative, and Tina is the author of the MAGA Diaries. Kelley, first of all, to you, what is your reaction to what we have seen today in relation to Iran striking back?
No, my first reaction is I wish Trump didn't get us into this mess in the first place. I feel like he had all of the opportunities for a diplomatic off-ramp. He was engaged in talks with Iran over its nuclear weapons or nuclear power program, and they were going into the 6 talks, and I feel like he took the military option, which puts the target on the backs of our U.S. men and women stationed in the Middle East. We have about 40,000 personnel in the Middle East currently. We have soldiers on bases in Iraq and Syria left over from the last U.S. intervention in the Middle East. And now they have, like I said, targets on their backs. And thankfully, as we are recording now, there have been no injuries or casualties reported. I think the missiles have been intercepted, but it shows you how precarious the situation is after the U.S. decided to launch those strikes against Iran Saturday, and how we have sort of kind of lurched in to a war situation with Iran in the Middle East. The second war in the Middle East in 25 years, and it's just it is I don't know, I want to say depressing, but I don't want to get too emotional here, but I do feel like this could have all been averted.
Tina, I know you're not really here to express opinions one way or another about the policy itself, but obviously there is a really sharp distinction or difference within, I would say, maybe the conservative movement or the populist movement, America First, if you want to call it that. How much of a sharp point has this situation with Iran and the American strikes on Iran put on those divides?
It's like getting to the biggest stress test between the two poles of the MAGA movement and taking over the American right. You have the populists who back Trump, who were the motivating energy behind Trump getting into office, who posed a strong counterpoint to the pre-existing Republican establishment, which included the neocons, pro-Israel people who all wanted to, flex their power in the Middle East, primarily through military means. And the populist movement was always considering, the populist movement always saw the Middle East as a quagmire that foolhardy elitist leaders brought the country into. At this point, this is the biggest. This is exactly what they never wanted. They did not want the military back in the Middle East. They celebrated Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan, even though that country fell into the hands of the Taliban quite quickly. They're like, oh yeah, it's great. We're out of there. We got out of this decision. And then Trump just pivoted to the exact opposite. That's one thing they're very consistent on. Even if they backed Donald Trump to almost the ends of the earth, this is their final stop. This is where they take us too far.
And it's interesting to that point, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I think, I've been critical of her. A lot of people who aren't exactly cast from the exact same ideological cloth as she is have been critical of her in lots of different ways, but so far at least, on this topic, she seems to have remained consistent with what she espouses as her principle, which is that certainly in general the US shouldn't get involved in these wars, and specifically in this case, she thinks of it, I think, as the US getting involved in a conflict at the behest of Israel. So she is sticking with that, even though she's very loyal to Trump in other respects, right?
Yeah, that also goes back to a long-standing right that he has, I guess, against, let's put it in a very delicate manner, Jewish and American interest in foreign policy. If you go back far enough in her, I guess, history of public statements, she's always criticized a very sartorial view of how the Jewish interests play out in America. But one of those avenues has always been like war, support of the state, and seeing Trump go to this extreme in order to advance the state of Israel's interests, like, walks into a very sensitive area for her. Like, this is exactly the nightmare scenario she never wanted.
Mm-hmm. Kelley, you were talking about the importance of restraint as you see it, and I'm not casting you in the same light as Marjorie Taylor Greene by any stretch of the imagination. But do you fear now there are going to be further escalations? I mean, perhaps these Iranian strikes, if they haven't done any fatal damage, perhaps there could be an off-ramp here. But how acute are your worries that there isn't going to be an off-ramp and the US is going to get enmeshed further in a Middle East conflict?
No, I think there's an absolute concern on both the left and the right. I don't think it's a surprise that you do see Marjorie Taylor Greene espousing the views of restraint on this issue or any foreign wars. I mean, she comes from a part of the base that really believed, as Tina pointed out, that Trump was serving as a different voice when it came to interventions, military interventions abroad. He promised the American people he wanted no more foreign wars. He did not want to be the policeman of the globe. He really wanted to adhere to this principle that we are not going to put our men and women in harm's way for other countries' problems and wars and entanglements. And she is coming out very strong and showing the base that, hey, we have a principle, we're going to stick with it. I come from the Quincy Institute was started in 2020 as an institution of scholarly advocacy, journalism, to really challenge the deep state, the foreign policy establishment in Washington. And what we're doing is we're harnessing a lot of that energy on the right because it really does share common ground with the left in terms of their skepticism for intervention and really just sort of eschewing the policies that got us into the last Middle East war. And I think we share, both left and right, this real fear that Trump's actions on Saturday night, attacking Iran, attacking its nuclear facilities, is going to lurch us into another forever war. It's not a one and done, as he suggested on Saturday that we obliterated that nuclear program and then we're done and we can have peace now. I mean, people do have memories back to 2003 all the way up to 2020. When the Afghanistan war finally ended, that these things just don't proceed the way we want them to. And bombing a country and then just getting out is a fantasy. There will be repercussions. There will be political and economic impacts, as you're seeing today. And I think this is shared by the American people. It's not just Washington think tanks that feel this way. It's the American people are tired of war.
Tina, you are nodding your head to at least some of that. What was it about what Kelley said that really resonated with you or that you found yourself in agreement with?
Well, she was talking about the idea that the operation and that Trump's going, ugh. When she finally got the assumption that Trump must be going under in order to justify bombing Iran, where you fly into the country, hit a bunch of nuclear targets, get out, everything's done, congratulations. Like, that is where Donald Trump's ego has come into play over any sort of ideological promise or alignment that he's made with anyone. Like, this is a moment where Trump goes, oh man, I am so strong, I am so powerful. That deep instinct that we've all kind of seen buried underneath him for the past 8 years is finally coming out to play, and no one can stop him. And this is the first time I think that Congress has really reckoned with the fact that there are times where they can't call him out of doing this. And even if they try, this is something they can't reverse. You can't undo bombing an enemy of the American people and of the United States of America. That's not something people are going to roll over. I think earlier this morning, Trump tweeted out something along the lines of, everyone needs to stop buying oil, even other countries. We know what Iran is doing by raising oil prices. Hold strong. No one is going to do that. Absolutely no one is going to say, yes, I will do what Trump is saying by not buying oil. This is a power far beyond his own ego, but this is a thing he's done because.
Oh, and to that point, Tina, I mean, I think that's a really an interesting point you raise about his ego and his self-image, which seems to be often very sort of super aggressive, super belligerent, whatever you want to call it. And it strikes me that his base actually loves that when it comes to domestic or so-called culture war issues, right? So when he's beating his chest and threatening to sue media organizations or crack down on colleges or fight what he would see as the good fight against so-called wokeness, his base loves that. But your suggestion is that in foreign policy, they don't at all love where it has led in this particular instance, right?
Right. Like, the idea of America first is focused on America. The rest of the world can do whatever it is they want unless it impacts America directly. And this is a totally different scenario than what they ever really grapple, the way they ever thought Trump would dabble in. If Iran had bombed the United States or targeted the United States militarily, I think you would see the MAGA base being more open to bombing Iran or whatever sort of military retaliation Trump might want to take. This was a war that the United States was not involved in. This was a war that the United States did not have to be involved in. But Trump just took America to stop them right in there, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that. And that would be taking resources away from the mid-minded associate, in my estimation, things that they need to solve home. Like, that was the entire argument they made in 2016, right? Why are we spending money abroad when we are spending it on problems at home? So this really is sort of an absolute betrayal of that set of values.
Kelley, to come back to you for a second, first of all, I should say to you both and to our audience, we did try to get someone to come on from a more hawkish position, and basically we a few people declined to come on, and that's that. So I will take the other side here, Kelley, for a second. What would you say to those who look at what has happened in Iran and will say something like the following? Donald Trump is more willing than others would have been to take on this Iranian regime. That regime has been a thorn in the side of the United States and American interests for a very long time. It has financed groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. The fact that Trump was willing to cross this line, which Biden and Obama and Bush weren't, has actually done at least the Western world a favor. And perhaps Iran is too weakened to strike back, so we're all good. What would you say to that argument?
I'll go back to what I had originally suggested earlier, was that I think the diplomatic pathway was working. It was working under Obama. When I say working, I mean that there were restrictions and limits on this nuclear program, all in place. And for the most part, the IAEA, the UN, and our partners who had also signed on to this JCPOA under Obama had been working. Trump came in 2018 and he got out of the deal. And Iran, which meant that we reimposed maximal pressure through sanctions on Iran. And what did they do in reaction? They started enriching uranium levels beyond what those limits had been. So then Trump comes back in. He says, I'm going to make it better deal. I'm going to deal with that. I don't want to go to war. He actually telegraphed that. And they were in on it for several rounds. They were going into their sixth round of talks. So there's actually a way to diminish or hem in or defang this Iranian regime without going to war. So now what we have is a belligerent regime that's in the corner because it's being attacked by Israel. It's now being attacked by the United States. It's a nuclear program, which is a civilian nuclear program as it is now. Our own intelligence said that they weren't building a bomb. It is now under threat, so that their power and energy is now is disrupted. And so, what are they going to do? They're gonna act out accordingly, like any other sovereign nation would do. So he's starting out and unleash more violence out of
Roshi Kelley, but do they have the power to act out again? I guess that's the question.
They have the power. I mean, they have been attacking Israel for over a week, and I remember pundits late or early last week after Israel launched its original attacks, saying that this was going to be a quick operation because they had the missile defense, they had the assistance from the United States in missile defense, and Iran was an inferior military capability. And they have been attacking Israel for several days straight and actually doing damage because those missiles are getting through. And Israel is running out of anti-missile defenses and interceptors. We have given them everything we possibly can, and we've been giving Ukraine missile defense since 2022. So we're running out of options here, too. And so I wouldn't underestimate Iran. Of course, we have more. The United States has more, and probably the U.S. and Israel combined have more. But our resources aren't limitless. And so, I would definitely caution against underestimating Iran. And not only that, but they can do damage economically by closing the Strait of Hormuz and also attacking our allies and partners in the region, the U.S. bases in the region, which it just threatens the trust and the faith and the system there in the Middle East. All for what? We could have settled this in a negotiating space and not on a battlefield.
Tina, final question to you, looking at the bigger picture here, or the broader debates that go on within the MAGA movement. We all know that President Trump he elicits enormous personal loyalty from his base. Yes, a huge number of Americans loathe him, but that MAGA base really loves him. On the other hand, he has got crosswise with some of the people we mentioned, the Steve Bannons and Tucker Carlsons, and from this general impulse to avoid intervention. Do you think, does that loyalty mean that the base will in any way shift in a more, in a way that makes them at least more hospitable to these American interventions overseas? Or do you think that anti-interventionist streak is so strong that they will stick to that for the most part?
Let's say it's the second option, the anti-interventionist streak. Sure, it might be hard for Bannon and Tucker to telegraph to the base, you have to listen to us more than you listen to Donald Trump. But they can make a very compelling case that the first people who will be thrown into the line of fire will be people in MAGA, people who might be lower income, have fewer opportunities, probably went to the military. If it ended up to the point that American troops especially people who might come from MAGA families, are killed, simply, you may see the movement turn on Trump. It's always been like going back to America first. Ours should have started first. The minute that Trump's interests override their interests in mass, that's sort of where I think you'll see this switch happen, but not until then.
Tina Nguyen of The Verge and author of the MAGA Diaries, and Kelley Vlahos of the Quincy Institute. Thanks for joining us at the Hill.